Randolph Scott, born George Randolph Scott on January 23, 1898 in Orange County, Virginia, became one of Hollywood's most enduring stars and a defining figure of the Western genre. From the silent film era through the late 1960s, Scott embodied a screen presence that symbolized restraint, honor, and quiet strength. Audiences admired him not for flashy performances, but for his calm authority and moral certainty. His characters often stood alone against chaos, reflecting an idealized version of American masculinity rooted in integrity rather than bravado. Over a career spanning more than 4 decades, Scott appeared in over 100 films, many of which remain staples of classic cinema. Yet, while his on-screen persona was well known, the man behind the cowboy hat remained deeply private. This contrast between public image and private reality would become one of the most intriguing aspects of his legacy, shaping how he was remembered long after the cameras stopped rolling. A privileged upbringing and formative values, Scott grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, in a comfortable and socially connected household. His father, George Grant Scott, worked as a certified public accountant, while his mother, Lucille Crane Scott, managed the home and emphasized discipline and moral values. This stable upbringing afforded Scott access to quality education and cultural exposure that shaped his reserved demeanor. He attended private schools before enrolling at the Georgia Institute of Technology, initially pursuing engineering. However, his studies were interrupted by World War I, a turning point that would profoundly influence his outlook on life. Scott enlisted in the U.S. Army and served in France, gaining maturity and discipline despite not seeing frontline combat. The experience instilled in him a deep respect for structure, responsibility, and restraint. These values would later translate seamlessly into his screen roles, particularly in Westerns, where honor, duty, and personal code defined the heroes he portrayed. Hollywood beginnings and the search for direction. After returning from military service, Scott found himself restless and uncertain about his future. Drawn to opportunity and adventure, he relocated to California in the early 1920s as Hollywood rapidly emerged as the center of the film industry. With encouragement from his father, Scott enrolled in acting classes and began working as an extra in silent films. His tall frame, athletic build, and natural composure quickly caught the attention of casting directors. Though early roles were minor, they provided valuable experience and exposure. A significant break came when influential director Cecil B. DeMille noticed Scott's presence and cast him in supporting roles that showcased his potential. Films such as The Virginian helped establish him as a promising leading man. While fame did not arrive overnight, Scott's steady rise reflected his patience and professionalism, qualities that would define both his career trajectory and his enduring reputation in Hollywood. Becoming the definitive Western hero. The 1930s and 1940s marked the height of Randolph Scott's popularity as he became one of the most reliable stars in Western cinema. Films like Jesse James, Western Union, and The Last of the Mohicans cemented his status as the embodiment of the Western hero. What distinguished Scott from his peers was his understated style. He avoided exaggerated emotion, instead conveying strength through stillness and moral clarity. His characters were often introspective men navigating ethical dilemmas rather than simple good versus evil narratives. This approach gave his performances depth and credibility, allowing audiences to see themselves reflected in his struggles. Scott's Westerns resonated during a time when America sought stability and principle, especially during wartime and post-war years. He became a symbol of reliability both on screen and at the box office, proving that quiet conviction could be just as compelling as spectacle. Artistic maturity and the Bud Boetticher years. One of the most respected phases of Scott's career came in the 1950s through his collaboration with director Bud Boetticher. Together they produced a series of lean, character-driven westerns often referred to as the Ranone cycle. Films such as 7 Men from Now, The Tall T, and Ride Lonesome explored themes of revenge, redemption, and moral ambiguity. Scott portrayed older, world-weary men shaped by loss and consequence, bringing a reflective gravity to his roles. These performances marked a departure from traditional heroic archetypes, offering more nuanced portrayals that influenced future filmmakers. Critics later recognized these films as some of the finest westerns ever made. For Scott, this period represented the culmination of his artistic growth, blending experience, restraint, and emotional depth. His work during these years demonstrated that simplicity, when paired with honesty, could create lasting cinematic power. A private life. Lived with intention. Despite his fame, Randolph Scott maintained a remarkably private personal life. He avoided Hollywood scandals, rarely gave interviews, and carefully guarded his inner world. Scott married twice and ultimately built a quiet family life away from public scrutiny, focusing on stability rather than celebrity. He was known among friends as soft-spoken, courteous, and deeply reserved. Faith and routine played important roles in his daily life, offering structure and peace. Unlike many contemporaries, Scott showed little interest in social excess or publicity. He preferred golf, close friendships, and time at home to red carpets and premieres. This discretion contributed to an air of mystery that followed him throughout his life. While fans adored his work, they knew little about his emotional landscape. Scott seemed content with that separation, believing that privacy was essential to preserving both personal integrity and professional longevity. Retirement and a graceful exit from fame. In 1962, Randolph Scott made the deliberate decision to retire following Ride the High Country, a film widely regarded as one of the greatest westerns ever made. Rather than fade slowly or chase relevance, Scott chose a dignified departure at the peak of artistic respect. Retirement allowed him to fully step away from public life and enjoy the rewards of decades of disciplined work. He remained active through golf, charitable involvement, and careful financial management, having been a shrewd investor throughout his career. Scott embraced anonymity with ease, rarely appearing at industry events or reunions. Friends noted that he seemed at peace, content with a life free from cameras and expectations. His retirement reflected the same restraint that defined his career. By leaving on his own terms, Scott reinforced the quiet strength that had always characterized him, both as an actor and as a man. A letter that revealed reflection, not sensation. After Randolph Scott's death in 1987, a personal note he left behind offered rare insight into his inner life. And the letter was not sensational, nor did it reveal scandal, but it carried emotional weight. In it, Scott reflected on loneliness, privacy, and the emotional cost of living behind a carefully maintained public image. He expressed gratitude for his life while acknowledging moments of isolation and regret. The note suggested a man deeply aware of the trade-offs fame demanded, particularly during Hollywood's golden age, when personal authenticity was often sacrificed for career survival. Scott did not accuse, confess, or explain himself in explicit terms. Instead, he offered quiet honesty about the challenges of emotional restraint. The letter resonated because it humanized a figure long viewed as impenetrable. It reminded readers that even the strongest public figures carry private burdens unseen by the world. Understanding the pressures of Hollywood's golden age, Scott's reflections prompted renewed discussion about the rigid expectations placed on actors during Hollywood's studio era. Public image was tightly controlled, personal boundaries were limited, and deviation from social norms carried serious professional consequences. For many stars, privacy was not simply a preference, but a survival strategy. Scott's life exemplified this reality. His discipline and discretion allowed him to maintain a long, respected career, but they also required emotional distance. The note he left behind highlighted the quiet sacrifices made by performers of his generation. Rather than rewriting his legacy, it deepened it by adding emotional context. Scott's experiences mirrored those of many actors who navigated fame without the freedom to fully express themselves. His story encourages modern audiences to reconsider the cost of celebrity and the courage required to endure it with dignity. In this light, his restraint becomes not a limitation, but a form of strength. A legacy enriched by humanity. Today, Randolph Scott's legacy remains firmly intact, enriched rather than diminished by deeper understanding. His films continue to define the Western genre, admired for their clarity, discipline, and moral focus. The personal reflections revealed after his death add complexity to the man behind the myth, allowing audiences to appreciate his humanity alongside his heroism. Scott's life serves as a reminder that authenticity takes many forms, and that quiet endurance can be as meaningful as bold expression. He lived within the constraints of his time, doing so with grace and integrity. In sharing his reflections privately, Scott offered a final act of honesty that resonates across generations. His story reminds us that public strength often conceals private struggle, and that true legacy lies not only in what we achieve, but in how thoughtfully we carry ourselves through life. Randolph Scott remains a symbol of dignity, both on screen and beyond it.